Picture this. You crash at the final corner, your bike slides into the gravel, 5 laps left in the sprint race, and your championship rivals are pulling away. Most riders would sit up, dust themselves off, and accept the DNF. But Marc Marquez is not most riders. Instead of walking back to the garage with his head down, he made a split-second decision that nobody in the paddock saw coming, and ended up on the top step of the podium anyway. That's exactly what went down at the Spanish GP sprint in Jerez on April 25th, 2026. And what's got the entire MotoGP world buzzing isn't just the fact that he won, it's how he pulled it off, and whether he should have been allowed to do it at all. In this video, we're going deep on the full story. What actually happened out on track, the rulebook explanation that cleared him, why his rivals are genuinely angry, and what this whole episode tells us about the kind of competitor Marc Marquez really is. Stay with me till the end, because I've got a question for you that I genuinely want your answer to. To understand why this controversy blew up, you need to know what the situation looked like heading into those final laps. The Jerez sprint was already a tactical chess match before the rain even came into the picture. Track conditions were shifting, the surface was starting to dampen, and every team on the pit wall was watching the sky and watching their data, trying to figure out the exact right moment to call their rider in for a bike swap to wet weather tires. Marquez was running in second place with 5 laps remaining, and had actually been considering pitting on that very lap. But when he looked across and saw his brother Alex riding for Gresini, staying out on his current tires, he decided to mirror that call and stay out too. On paper, it was a reasonable read of the situation. Alex had been rapid all weekend. If he thought the slick tires could still do the job, maybe they could, but the track had other ideas. At the final corner, on a surface that was now properly damp, Marquez lost the front end and went down. It wasn't a massive high side, he walked away physically fine, but the race was effectively over for him. Or so everyone thought. Here's where it gets wild. When Marquez slid into the runoff area at the final corner, he found himself in a genuinely unusual position. The standard pit lane entry point at Jerez is located before the final corner. He had already passed it. Under normal circumstances, a rider in that situation simply waits for the session to end and takes the DNF. Marquez didn't do that. Instead, he waited calmly in the runoff area for every single other rider to go past him, making absolutely sure the track was completely clear. Then, once the coast was clear, he took an unconventional route across the grass to access the pit lane, bypassing the standard entry line because he'd already gone too far past it. His bike was still running. The engine hadn't cut out, and because of that, he was technically still a participant in the race, not a retiree. He rolled into the Ducati garage, the crew scrambled into action, and he switched to a bike already fitted with wet weather tires. Back out on track, now with the right rubber for the conditions Marquez began hunting, he reeled in Fermin Aldeguer and then passed his own factory Ducati teammate Francesco Bagnaia to take the race win. One of the most unlikely and chaotic sprint victories in recent MotoGP memory. The paddock didn't know whether to applaud or protest. So the obvious question, how was he not penalized? Because from the outside, crossing the grass to enter the pit lane looks like exactly the kind of thing that should draw a black and orange flag at minimum. According to the official MotoGP clarification released after the race, Marquez entered the pit lane in accordance with the published definition. He crossed the pit lane entry timing point, the designated entrance where the 60 km/h signs are displayed. Crucially, there is no specific regulation stating that riders must enter the pit lane from one fixed physical location. In other words, the rulebook defines pit lane entry by a timing point, not by a painted line on the track surface. Marquez hit that timing point. Box ticked. Furthermore, he didn't disregard any marshal instructions. He didn't create a dangerous situation when crossing the track because he waited until it was completely clear, and he didn't shortcut a significant section of the circuit. Meaning, no meaningful advantage was gained through the route he took. MotoGP sporting regulations also allow riders who accidentally leave the circuit to rejoin at a point indicated by officials or at a location where they haven't benefited from leaving the track. Marquez ticked those boxes too. He left the track involuntarily through a crash, waited for the track to be safe, and rejoined without cutting the circuit in any meaningful way. No investigation was opened. No penalty was issued. The result stood. When Marquez was asked about it afterwards, he was almost casual about the whole thing. He said the rules are clear. If you don't gain time, don't create a dangerous situation, and don't cut corners from the service road, you're within the regulations. His attitude was essentially, I read the rules, I acted within them. What's the problem? The problem, according to some of his rivals, is that the letter of the law and the spirit of the law aren't always the same thing. Johann Zarco of LCR Honda was among the most outspoken voices after the race, publicly questioning whether Marquez should have been allowed to keep the victory. The argument from that camp is straightforward. A rider who crashes should not be able to access the pit lane via a route that wasn't the designated one, switch bikes, and then win the race. It feels like an exploit, even if it isn't technically illegal. And there's something to that. MotoGP's penalty and regulation system has faced criticism for years over inconsistency. There have been numerous occasions where riders received penalties for incidents that seemed far less ambiguous than this one. When a gray area exists in the rulebook and a top-level competitor finds it and uses it to win a race, it naturally raises the question of whether that gray area needs to be closed. To be fair to the stewards, they had to make a call based on the rules as they exist right now. Not as someone might wish they existed, and based on the rules as written, Marquez did nothing wrong. But don't be surprised if this specific scenario gets addressed in a regulation update before too long. What makes this story even more interesting is how Marquez himself framed the win afterwards. He didn't come out pumping his fists and talking about genius strategy. He was remarkably straightforward about it. He called the win lucky. Specifically, he said he was lucky that the crash happened at the final corner near the pit lane entrance. Because if he'd lost the front at turn 1 instead, none of this would have been possible. He also openly admitted that the smarter call would have been to pit the lap before. Watching Alex stay out influenced his thinking, and that's ultimately what put him in the position of crashing in the first place. And in a move that showed genuine self-awareness, he acknowledged that his brother Alex was simply faster than him at Jerez this weekend, roughly half a second quicker on a flying lap and 3 to 4 tenths faster in race pace. Alex, for his part, eventually crashed while still on slick tires as the conditions deteriorated, robbing him of what could have been a breakthrough result. So the Marquez who won that sprint was not the dominant, in-control Marquez of his prime championship years. It was a Marquez who made a mistake, got fortunate with where that mistake happened, and then had the mental sharpness to immediately figure out what his options were and act on them. That instinct, that refusal to accept defeat even when defeat looks inevitable, is arguably what separates him from the rest. Zoom out for a second and there are some genuinely interesting takeaways from what happened in Jerez. In a sport where everything happens at 200+ kilometers per hour, the margins between winning and losing are absurdly thin. Race outcomes can be flipped not just by raw speed, but by decisions made in under a second while a rider is literally picking himself up off the tarmac. The riders and teams who succeed at this level aren't just the fastest. They're the ones who understand the rules completely, think clearly under chaos, and find opportunities in situations where most people would already be mentally checking out. What Marquez did in Jerez was unconventional, controversial, and debatable. But it was also, within the rules, completely legitimate. Whether you think it's brilliant or whether you think it's a loophole that shouldn't exist, one thing is undeniable. It made for one of the most memorable moments of the 2026 MotoGP season so far. All right, here's where I need your take. Do you think Marquez genuinely deserved that win, or do you feel like he exploited a gap in the regulations that shouldn't have been there in the first place? There's genuinely no clear-cut right or wrong here. This is exactly the kind of debate that makes MotoGP so compelling. Drop your honest opinion in the comments below. I read everything, and the best takes might just make it into the next video. If this kind of deep dive content is your thing, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell. We cover every race and every controversy with the same level of detail. And if you've got a friend who follows MotoGP, send them this video. The more voices in the comments, the better the conversation gets. One last thing before you go. Leave your race prediction in the comments right now. Who takes the Spanish Grand Prix tomorrow? Does Marquez back it up and complete the weekend double? Does Alex bounce back from his crash and take the main race? Or does someone completely different step up and catch everyone off guard? Drop your prediction below and we'll be back after Sunday's race to see who called it right. See you then. Enjoy the racing.